All right, welcome to those who are joining. We'll get started in about one to 2 minutes. I just want to give people time to get from one meeting to the next.
That's fine. I'll come.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the Penn Nursing Innovation Colloquium. Really excited to be joined by my colleagues from the Penn Center for Innovation, Dr. Neetu Singh Amin and Dr. Melissa Kelly. They're going to be talking with you today about bridging the gap between ideas and practice. They have a wealth of combined knowledge between them and are such a resource here at Penn Nursing to our faculty, students, and staff. And I think you'll get a lot out of their presentation, talking about how you can take the work you're doing, specifically in the research space, and translating that into the innovation space. If you have questions, you can throw those in the chat or the Q&A part. I'll be monitoring that, and we have left room at the end of the presentation for questions as well. With that, I'm going to just have them kick us off.
Thank you, Marian. Thank you so much for the invitation to come in and talk with everyone. We're excited to talk about our organization. For those of you who maybe haven't worked with us before, or maybe new to Penn, just more generally, we're just really excited to be here. So a big thanks to Marian for the invitation to come talk with you. So on the first, there we go. Like any good presentation, we have a bit of an agenda. So we're going to just tick through these items so you know what to expect in our discussion today. So the first piece is, for those of you who haven't worked with us, we did want to give an overview of the Penn Center for Innovation and, who we are and what we do and how we work with faculty researchers like yourselves. And then we're going to touch on, identifying innovation in your everyday. Questions to maybe ask yourself and when you're thinking about, new ideas and discoveries that you may develop. Then we're going to touch on the intellectual property and licensing processes here at PCI, the services that we offer through our corporate contracts team. And then if there's time, sort of round out the discussion around some success stories that may be relevant, more aligned with the types of technologies we would see from the School of Nursing. So first, working together with us here at PCI, who we are and what we do. So our organization helps to translate the discoveries and ideas that are generated by our faculty and staff into, new products and potentially businesses, all with the benefit to society. We do this in a number of ways, but primarily by facilitating connections between our Penn researchers like yourselves and the private sector. And this can take many forms, whether it is a license agreement to maybe a technology that you've developed here at Penn, a R&D alliance or some type of collaboration with an industry partner, or perhaps a formation of a new a new startup company. But in the end, we like to think that we sort of serve as a one-stop shop for commercial partnering with the University of Pennsylvania. So how we do this is in a number of different ways, and I'll touch on the team component in my next slide, but we do have a number of teams here within the organization at PCI that help work with our faculty members and commercialize their ideas. We have a number of different programs, resources, and events that we host. One here that's highlighted is called ICOR, but we also have monthly seminar series that we host with physical medicine and engineering that are open to everyone, that touch on a number of different topics around, what's a venture capitalist, to understanding, the basics around patent law and those sorts of things. So we do try to make sure that we're getting the information out there to our faculty researchers. And then also, with Neetu and I also go to different conferences where we are trying to, bridge and foster relationships with industry partners, and at the same time kind of showcase the technologies that our Penn faculty members are developing. And then lastly, we're here to help support the further development and commercialization of your research. And again, that goes back to a number of different ways that we do that, whether it's by licensing, facilitating, sponsored research or collaborative research activities, or perhaps creating a new startup. And touching on the team component, you can see here in the slide that we have a number of different teams here within the organization. And actually, I don't even think this is all of the teams that we have, but these are the teams that will most often be involved in sort of that innovation timeline. So everything from the time that a faculty member would disclose intellectual property to us, to when we end up in sort of the final business arrangement, again, whether that be a license, collaboration, or potential new venture. And so you can see here is that the licensing team, which is where Neetu and I focus a lot of our efforts, we're with you the entire step of the way. So we're going to be the primary point of contact for faculty who are disclosing new ideas to us. We'll be involved in all of these key touch points during the innovation timeline, but we don't work in isolation. We just have a number of folks here within the organization that help facilitate technologies through this innovation timeline. Should note that our office is, I think we have 75 or 77 people now. So we are one of the largest, tech transfer offices, and that, at least not maybe in the country, but within our peer institutions. So we do have a lot of support here within the organization. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Neetu to talk about identifying innovation in our day-to-day.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And if you have any questions throughout while I'm talking, please feel free to just unmute and ask the question. If there's something in the chat, I probably won't see it, but I'm happy to answer questions throughout. So the first step before working with us is identifying the innovation. So there are some questions to ask yourselves. Two of those questions, or a few of those questions, are: have you devised solutions to improve upon an existing process or procedure, and would others benefit from those solutions? Also, have you created something that addresses an unmet need or an unanswered question? This is trying to figure out, like, do I have an invention here? And that's something that might be an invention. Can be anything from, for example, new drugs, vaccines, therapeutic treatments, cell lines and software that fall under the category of biomedical research, to those that fall under probably the more relevant category to you all of clinical research, such as medical devices, surgical training devices, clinical assessment and diagnostic tools, protocols, and again, software apps. And once you have a potential invention, the next step is to disclose that invention to PCI. So this is just outlining what should be disclosed and when. So disclosures are required for research governed by DOL. So anything that's federally funded and any potentially patentable inventions and discoveries according to the Penn patent policy, which we've linked in the presentation. Disclosures are encouraged for all other potential inventions and developments you feel may solve a problem or have commercial value. For example, interesting data, know-how, device prototypes, and improvements to something useful. These disclosures should occur well before any public disclosure or presentation of the discovery, whether those public disclosures be through abstracts, poster presentations, conferences, publications, press releases, or other communications. So basically any disclosure in any format, whether written or oral, to anyone who is not a Penn employee. In most countries, once you publicly disclose an invention, you're no longer able to apply for a patent application. In the US, there is a 1-year grace period from the date of public disclosure of an invention to file a patent application, but filing only in the US can significantly reduce the market size. So we ask that you disclose early if possible so that we can take the appropriate actions needed in a timely manner. Other examples of when to contact us, besides for when you think you might have an invention, are if a company has contacted you about discussing your research or a particular area of expertise that you have, and if a company has contacted you about getting access to reagents that you generated and publishing a manuscript, even if they want to send you reagents to potentially test out, we could also help you with that in the reverse direction. So what are some key ingredients for success? We should identify, to be successful, we suggest identifying the need. So what important problem will your innovation solve? The approach, can you briefly explain your innovation in a way that persuades your audience it's reasonably likely to work? So this is your so-called elevator pitch. And does it beat the competition? How and why is your solution superior to the alternatives from a customer or user perspective? Once you've gone through these things or discussed them with us, there are various ways that we can help you. And that takes me to these next slides, which is just, I'm going to walk you through basically an overview of the intellectual property or IP and licensing processes, and then Melissa will take you through the corporate contract services. So the first step is the research, and that you carry out through support through Penn, government grants, and corporate sponsorships. Once you think you have an invention, you can disclose it through our portal, or oftentimes a faculty member will want to discuss the ideas with us first. And in either case, you can feel free to contact us and talk it through, and whether you disclose, whether you want to talk it through or you're just like, no, I'm ready to disclose. I know I have an invention here. I want to get it on file in our system. You can contact us for the invention disclosure form. If you don't want to go through a portal, I find most faculty and staff prefer it this way. And we will send you the form in a Word doc, and you can just complete it and send it back to us. But it's kind of easier to ask questions that way. It feels a little more personal. And then what happens when that invention disclosure comes in, it's assigned to a technology licensing officer. So that would be either Melissa or myself. And we, along with a team of fellows that we have here at PCI, assess the technology from a commercial perspective and to look at the market to see if there's actually a commercial opportunity here. And then the next step is to decide if there is a commercial opportunity or potential commercial opportunity, what are we gonna do to so-called protect that opportunity? So we decide whether it makes sense to file a patent application, or if this is like a copyrightable work only, and how to proceed with next steps for the protection. And we will discuss with you, the inventor, the best strategies to move forward, because while we might think we may have a list of companies that might be interested in licensing the technology to take it to the next stages of development to get products out to patients, the inventor might say, oh, actually, no, I want to form my own startup company. And if that's the case, then we'll work together with the inventor to help facilitate that. And this, I think if you add the next one too, it'll make sense. So yeah, so then we do a market analysis to identify potential clients and partners. And this is kind of done, this is not necessarily done in the order that is laid out. We're going to kind of look at the market while we're deciding what the opportunity is. So kind of at the protection stage. And then, but after we decide on that path, then we can market the technology broadly. If it's been at this point publicly disclosed, or if we think it's a good time to start marketing, then we'll reach out to companies, and that's through contacts that we already have, new contacts that we make based on the technologies, and also contacts that we make through, for example, what Melissa mentioned earlier, going through conferences and meeting potential new partners. And we also are connected to companies that are interested in developing technologies further through the actual inventors themselves, because a lot of times they already have relationships with people at companies, or they meet company representatives through presenting at conferences. So we're always happy to kind of be given those introductions. If you're a lot of the faculty say, hey, I don't want to deal with the business stuff, and can you please talk to this person from this company? I'm not sure how we can work together, and we're happy to facilitate those business relationships. And we can then facilitate different types of license of agreements between Penn and these companies. The main types of agreements that the licensing team works on are like option agreements and license agreements for licenses to the technology. And Melissa's going to go through a long list of different types of agreements that her corporate contracts team manages, that can also be very helpful for the nursing team.
Thanks, Neetu. So as she mentioned, I'm going to walk everyone through at a high level, sort of the services that the corporate contracts team provides. So that's kind of the other hat that I wear. So I manage a team that facilitates all of the research related agreements involving industry partners. And we have a team of 6 negotiators and 1 contract administrator. And so this is a very busy table, and I realize that, but it's just highlighting all the different agreement types that we do facilitate within the corporate contracts team. So we manage everything from your basic confidentiality agreement, and going back to what Neetu said, if you have a company that's coming to you and maybe wants to learn more about your research, maybe they saw a publication and they just want to get a bit more information on, maybe upcoming unpublished research that they may be interested in maybe collaborating with you on. You might need a confidentiality agreement, and we can facilitate that for you. And then, going back to, if a company wants to send you materials, or if we want to provide materials to a company, you may need a material transfer agreement. We can facilitate that for you as well. So basically, we do almost all research related agreements with industry, except for human clinical trials. Those are facilitated by a separate office, so I'll get to in just a minute. Interestingly, we do facilitate the veterinary clinical trials though through Penn Vet. So we do get to do some of that within our team. And some of you may have already worked with our corporate contracts team, and I should just note that for School of Nursing, you do have an assigned negotiator. Her name is Christine Baxter. And so if you recognize that name, that might be why. So oftentimes I get asked, who negotiates my agreement? So I always like to put this slide in here. This is also coming from the Vice Provost of Research and her website. So you can find it in multiple locations, but there are, 3 different contracting teams across the entirety of the university up until I think around 2012. So before I was here, all of this used to be in one single office, which was the Office of Research Services. And then after that, we broke out some of the functionalities with, corporate contracts being within PCI and Office of Clinical Research Legal, or OCR Legal, being under the general umbrella of the Office of Clinical Research. But in short, if you've got an agreement that's with a nonprofit, let's say it's a foundation funding agreement, or you have maybe an award from the NIH or NSF, something to that effect, that's generally going to go to the Office of Research Services, or ORS. Again, if you're working with an industry partner and it involves human clinical research, or if it involves research that does require informed consent from patient subjects, then that will go to OCR Legal. And then basically everything else kind of comes to corporate contracts. And then additionally, a lot of questions we get is, what system does my agreement request go into? And I know it can be kind of confusing. Penn has 2 main electronic systems to request agreements. And so Penn ERA is where all of these, your foundation and your federal awards and industry sponsored research and any human clinical trials, they'll all go into Penn ERA. So from corporate contracts, that's really just your SRAs and your monetary collaborative research agreements. The other system that Penn has is RIS, or the Research Inventory System. Within RIS, there are 2 modules. So you have the non-monetary module, and that's going to have all those confidentiality agreement requests or material transfer agreement requests, equipment loans, etc. It'll all go into the non-monetary side. And then there's a separate module called the fee-for-service module. It's pretty self-explanatory. That's where all the fee-for-service agreements get routed. Oftentimes, cores or certain centers across campus may do a lot of fee-for-service. And then some centers, like the Singh Center, for example, has some really unique equipment. And so sometimes companies will want to come in for a facility use agreement to make use of that equipment for a particular research project they're conducting. And all of those go into the fee-for-service module. And so that's kind of a high-level overview of corporate contracts. If there are questions on any specifics, I love talking about corporate contracts, so please just let me know. But I do think we wanted to touch on a few success stories just to kind of put in perspective, the types of technologies that we see and the different types of business arrangements that can help that we can help facilitate on the back end. And so some of you may be familiar with this work. It's coming from the School of Medicine, so Victoria Worth, and she has developed a variety of tools. So basically it's just Word document and surveys for various dermatological diseases. And so I've highlighted one of them here called Classy. But this is just one of a whole suite of tools that she's developed over the years. And these have become essentially outcome measures that are used in clinical trials. And these clinical trials are being run by other academic centers, being run by, pharmaceutical companies and all sorts of groups, but it's become sort of the gold standard for measuring these outcomes. And as a result, the Classy tool that we're highlighting here, it's been licensed 182 times to various entities. And so that's just to show this is just a Word document, right? But it's a Word doc that has been tested and validated in clinical-based research that has now become the gold standard for assessing these patients in clinical studies. Another example is, Jean Bennett from the Department of Ophthalmology. So she is one of the inventors on, you may have heard of Luxturna, which was and I think maybe one of the first ever gene therapy treatments for an inherited retinal disorder. And, she obviously works a lot in the ophthalmology space and inherited retinal disorder space, but she noticed that while she was trying to develop, new treatments and therapeutics, and saw that they were making their way through the FDA approval process, what she noticed as a gap was that there wasn't a robust, reproducible, and accurate test for the visual function of the patients that were being treated. I think before they had done sort of these manual physical mazes, but they didn't account for certain aspects of all forms of, inherited retinal disorders. And so in collaboration with computer scientists, they co-developed a virtual reality tool to basically remove the manual mechanism for running patients through these tests to test their visual function. And now that has also been licensed multiple times to companies that are developing new inherited retinal disorder treatments as, again, kind of a gold standard for, the clinical trials and the clinical outcomes of their patients that they're testing. So just another example of, I think a lot of times when people think of innovation, they're thinking, small molecules or therapeutics or biomarkers, et cetera. And, we just want to highlight that that's not always the case. And these are a couple of really good examples. And I think Neetu has even a more relevant example of, coming from the School of Nursing that she's going to talk about next.
Yeah, so this is actually two in one slide from Stephanie Modry, our prolific inventor, who always has a great new idea. So the first example is VasoWatch. So this is a upstart company, which is a startup company that was spun out through Penn, and that was with the help of PCI Ventures, which is a part of PCI. They help facilitate, or they kind of help our investigators through our faculty and staff through forming a startup company through they have 3 different programs that you can work with, 2 to actually form a startup company and 1 for some advising. So Stephanie is co-founder of VasoWatch. VasoWatch is the product that they eventually will develop is based on technology that was developed at Penn in collaboration with a faculty member who is now at a different university. So this is one way that a technology can be commercialized, is through forming the startup company. Now Stephanie has gained so much experience through forming this company and working with the CEO and with marketing that technology, that she is now working on a new invention that's unrelated to VasoWatch, in her capacity as a Penn employee outside of VasoWatch, and she is actually forming her own startup company. And now she's gained so much experience that she doesn't need to do it through PCIV. She's doing it on her own with outside consultants. And both of these projects receive funding from Penn Health Tech. And so that's a resource that's really valuable in not only providing funding, but to get a device prototype, for example, to a stage of development where it can receive even more funding. And I think we can provide links to that Penn Health Tech, actually, because if someone does have an idea, there's an upcoming deadline for the next round.
Yeah, it's in a couple of weeks, I think.
It is in a couple of weeks, and they actually have an information session. The information session actually might be today. Sorry, but I'm happy to connect you with my colleagues over at Penn Health Tech if you have something that might be of interest to them to fund. And with that, I think we'll take any questions that you might have.
This was so informative. Thank you both. While folks are thinking about questions, I have a question. I do know that there are some folks on this webinar call that aren't at Penn. I'm wondering if well, this is a two-part question. If they're at a similar university, are the processes across academic institutions the same or similar? I know they're probably not exactly what Penn does, but like the processes in general, are they the same? And then, not sure if you can answer this, but if they're not affiliated with an academic institution, are there resources to be able to commercialize something?
Yeah, the last one's gonna be tricky. Because yeah, I think that's gonna be on a kind of an individual basis to know if there may be different programs and resources available. Something we could, help think through if the folks are like located like regionally here in the Philadelphia area, maybe there are things we can direct them to. But for the folks who are associated with other academic institutions, but perhaps not Penn, most institutions will have a form of PCI, and they might call them, tech transfer offices or Center for Technology Transfer, tech commercialization office, tech licensing, etc. And those institutions who have those types of offices will generally have a similar process as it relates to, invention disclosures, hopefully leading to some type of license or other type of business relationship on the back end of that. But the process in between and sort of who handles what with respect to, IP filings and marketing efforts, et cetera, that might be slightly different. And then the resources that other institutions may have, particularly around, creating startup companies, like we have PCI Ventures, like that may differ between, one university to the next.
Great. While we're waiting for questions, if anybody has questions, feel free to either put them in the chat or, use the little raise hand function and come off of mute. But having gone through the process of the invention disclosure and trying to get a patent, I know that I was not so aware of how long all of this takes. Can you talk about like the timeline and the expectations of, we all think it's cool to like create something, but it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time and patience and persistence. Can you talk about like what that looks like?
That's a really good point, Marian. I think a lot of people don't appreciate how much work this all takes on the behalf of the inventor. So I think sometimes folks disclose something to our office and they just think, okay, great. Now you guys are just gonna take it, run with it, do with it what you will, let me know when it's licensed and I can expect my check in the mail.
I will say, I expected when I first did it.
Exactly. So, kind of depends on the technology, but let's take any technology like you're talking about, Marian, which was something that resulted in a patent application filing. And then, trying to, I can't remember in your case if we tried to create a startup or if we were working to partner with an existing.
It was create a startup first, and when that failed, licensing it to an existing company.
Right? So I think some folks don't necessarily appreciate sort of just the amount of time that an inventor is going to have to allocate towards just the patent process itself. So oftentimes, if a technology gets approved for a patent filing, that will require, conversations with outside counsel. So we use outside counsel for all of our patent related matters. We don't have in-house counsel do that. And so a faculty member is likely going to have to sit on those calls and talk about the technology so that the patent attorney can, adequately craft a patent application around that technology. And then you're going to have to review that to make sure that, again, it's accurate. But then as a patent application goes through the prosecution process, the patent office oftentimes is going to have something called office actions where they're going to say, well, we don't think you should get an issued claim or an issued patent around this technology because of these other technologies that are out there. And we have to tell them how it's different and rely on the inventors and the faculty to really help us make that case. So it does require a lot of input on throughout that process. And generally, you know, depending on the type of a technology that we're trying to file up or trying to get an issue patent around, it can take 3 to 4 years to get an issued patent, or it can take sometimes up to 10 years to get an issued patent. So it's a long process with a lot of these iterative steps and working with the patent office and the faculty and the inventor. And then if we're talking about creating a startup, similarly, the inventor is going to have to be pretty crucial, especially in the outset of that company formation. So we're going to want to make sure that whoever the CEO of the company is going to be really gels with the inventor, because the inventor is going to be a founder. It's their, you know, it's Penn technology, but it's their technology too, and got to make sure there's a good relationship there. And then the inventor is going to be asked to participate in pitch sessions and trying to get investment into the company so it can get up and off the ground, and that also takes, you know, quite a bit of time. And even when we're trying to get a technology license to an existing company, so we're kind of not doing the startup route, we still need the engagement from our faculty inventors to help explain to the company that may be interested in taking a license, you know, how the technology works, why it's better than what's already out there. And then even if we do end up licensing the technology rights to the company, there still may be some engagement with the inventor to be like, well, we want to make sure, the company's saying, we want to make sure we're doing this right. So can you help us understand how to, you know, what we call technology transfer, all of the know-how and protocols to basically make sure that the technology is up and running and working in the company's hands. So throughout this process, we do really rely pretty heavily on the faculty to be involved in that process. This is a very long-winded answer to your question, Marianne, but I think it just highlights just, again, how much we do expect or need the inventor's involvement throughout this process.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of, at least in my experience working with nurses in this space, they don't know what they don't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. And it is a lot of work on top of a lot of work that they're already doing. A lot of nurses are in grad school and working full time and raising families. And then, you know, going the patent route and creating a startup is like another full-time job, and just trying to put that in perspective a little, because I think that's not well known. Charlotte, I do see your question and I will ask it in a second. I do want to say, as the director of innovation, we don't define innovation solely as a product or technology or something that needs to be patented. So for those on this webinar, like, you know, we're talking about innovation broadly when we talk about innovation at Penn Nursing, but this talk was specific to, I think, you know, tech transfer. So, you know, that's why it's focusing on patents and licensing and all of that fun stuff. So I don't want to like scare others off of innovation. All right, so
just to even highlight the success story that we highlighted, the very first one for Victoria Worth, has nothing to do with patents. It's just a copyrightable tool that, and we have a couple examples that are more recent from nursing specifically. So not exactly to Marianne's point, not everything's going to be a patent, and we know that. And so we don't look at innovation as solely being the things that may be patent worthy. We see innovation broadly here at PCI too. So it's a good point, Marianne.
Great. All right. So Charlotte had a question. I'm wondering when someone should think about the commercialization parts discussed when they are preparing to develop and test a new technology for a study.
So, Mary, could you repeat the question? I want to make sure I answer it appropriately. The first part of the question.
And Charlotte, if you want to come off mute and clarify anything, feel free, but I'm happy to read it again. I'm wondering when someone should think about the commercialization parts discussed when they are preparing to develop and test a new technology for a study.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's a question that a lot of people have, is like, well, when do I start thinking about this? It's never too early. In my opinion, I think that if you have a question about it, then you should contact one of us and we can talk about it. And, you know, we can, even if you're thinking, from a perspective of, this is a really interesting project, this is a really interesting study, and I think something could come out of it, but I'm not sure. Let's talk about it, let's discuss it, and maybe we could even help, like, the discussion could help inform you, like, what kind of the direction the steps you can take to get it to a point of becoming a valuable, like, product, for example, for patients, or even a valuable questionnaire that could be used to help patients. Does that answer your question, Charlotte?
So I forgot we're on a Zoom event, so participants can't come off of mute. But
Okay.
Charlotte, if you want to answer in the chat, feel free. But I guess, earlier is better, right? Like talking with
Yes.
you all earlier as opposed to later is always the better option. So if you're not sure, reach out.
Yes, and also, like, and to add to that point, yes, earlier is better, but if you get to a point where you're like, oh my gosh, it's too late, I'm not gonna disclose now, it's too late. I say still reach out to us, because sometimes people think, oh, I already disclosed this invention, but actually they didn't, and they didn't because they didn't actually disclose the part of the invention that would be the patentable part that goes into the claims of the patent application. So they might not have disclosed so much information that we can no longer protect it. And that might not have been publicly disclosed. You may have only disclosed like the broad idea or something like that. So yeah, it's never too early. And if you think it's too late, contact us anyway.
And
And
that's
just to add on to that, I was gonna say, just to add on to that point too, if we're talking about something that's a copyrightable work,
Yes.
like, we don't have those same constraints. And so oftentimes what happens is a faculty member will do sort of a clinical validation study of a tool they're developing. And when I say tool, it's like a questionnaire or software or something to that effect. And they go ahead and publish it. And then after the fact, people are like, ooh, that grading scale that you published, that could be really valuable for my research project or my clinical study. And we don't have the same restrictions on the publication piece on, when something might be published as to when we can consider it being a copyrightable work and potentially licensable. So to Neetu's point, like, just contact us. We'll take a look. If something just isn't, if it's not gonna work because of whatever, restrictions are out there, we'll definitely let you know, and then you'll know for next time. But I would say, yeah, reach out to us if you have any questions or ideas or thoughts around something that may be valuable for others to make use of.
Yeah, these are both really, I think, important points to keep in mind, because we're always encouraging nurses to present to present their innovation ideas at like accelerators or hackathons. But as long as you're not presenting and pitching that part that is your intellectual property, or that is that could be patentable, then you're probably okay. But there's so many different levels and intricacies of this. So I always defer to the experts, to PCI, to Melissa and Neetu, so that they can help the faculty or student make those decisions.
Yeah, and for example, and Marion, thank you for adding that to the chat, the nursing innovation award that Stephanie was awarded. Sorry, I left that out of the slide. But there's an example of she pitched her idea and ran the slides by me first to make sure she was including only non-confidential information. So if confidential information was disclosed, then it could have threatened a future patent application that we would want to file. So she was very careful in making sure that there was only non-confidential information being presented. When she answered the questions, she kept her answers non-confidential, and we were happy to review those slides before she presented to make sure that the invention wasn't actually, the crux of the invention wasn't disclosed.
Yeah, the folks at PCI are such a resource. I highly recommend using them. And there are two other questions in the chat that I want to ask. So someone asked about, they're at a federal institution. Can you access the services and resources? Could they access the services and resources at your center? So the person says, I work for a federal institution, but have concerns around intellectual property, have some innovation ideas, but don't know how to begin.
Sure. So unfortunately, we only manage the intellectual property that's generated by Penn faculty during their employment here at Penn. So we were sort of solely focused on Penn and Penn intellectual and Penn IP and Penn faculty and research and staff. But if you work for a federal agency, your federal agency may have its own tech transfer function. For example, I used to work at the NIH. I did my postdoc there. And when I was there, I did an internship at the tech transfer office for the institute that I was doing my postdoc at, which was NHGRI. So a lot of the federal institutions may already have this function. You might just want to dig around and see if that's the case.
All right, final question that's in the Q&A. Can you please review some of the examples from nursing that were copyrightable and not something that was patentable?
Sure. So I think we actually have this as like on the other. Let's do right there. We go. So we have a couple. So Dr. Zhang from the School of Nursing right now has a couple of assessment tools that they've developed for the head and neck lymphedema and fibrosis. And so they developed this collaboratively with colleagues at Vanderbilt. I think Dr. Dang was previously at Vanderbilt. And so these tools are co-owned between us and Vanderbilt, but they're literally Word documents. They're copyrightable tools. But we have received a number of requests from a variety of research institutions across the world that would like access to particularly the symptom inventory tool, because it seems that there's a lot of that this is a gaping hole in the research, is being able to understand the symptoms of patients experiencing this. And so we've done some non-exclusive licenses for these copyrightable tools, and we're also working with our colleagues at Vanderbilt to facilitate further exposure and dissemination of the tools.
Yeah, another example that is kind of earlier in the commercialization process is Kate McDonald of the nursing school. She has collaboratively developed a tool for making driving safer for teens. So we're working on an interinstitutional agreement with the collaborating universities, and that will then be the technology will then be licensed on an online platform. And it's basically like a question. It's a copyrightable work. It's not anything that would be patentable.
Great. Any other final questions? Well, Melissa and Neetu, thank you so very much. This was really helpful, and I appreciate you taking your time to share this with all of us here at Penn Nursing. You guys are a huge force.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for the questions. I'm so happy when we get questions, so thank you for the thoughtful questions. And again, thank you for having us. If anybody has any additional questions, please reach out. And then also if it's worth having us come back and talk about a variation on a theme of what we presented today, we're happy to come back as well. So thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Please reach out to me if you ever want us to do anything more specific around these different topics, and we can set that up. So thank you both. I appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who joined.